Happy Wednesday, everybody. Let's get cracking because we have a lot to talk about, lots of news that are happening that I want to share with you. The first one is the Fed did the rate cut today, and that means that the interest rates are going to be coming down. And of course, there are some consequences to the action. So I want to share with you the study and the article behind it after we talk about what this live is all about. So let me share the article now on the main topic that I wanted to share with you. And then we're going to jump into that. Trying to figure out what this noise is. Mm. I'm trying to figure out which video is playing that I can shut off. Here it is. All right, I figured it out. Okay, so this is the article that I want to share with you. So let me present, share screen. All right. Here we go. This is the one. All right. So here's the one that I found interesting. What is going to happen to the housing market when boomers begin to die out? And hear me out, because this is actually something that I think a lot of us are not going to see until probably 7 years or so out. However, I'm always a big believer in planning things and not just waiting for the actual whatever it is, the crisis to happen, because at that point, it's going to be too late to plan, to act, and to figure things out. And here's what this article says. So, baby boomers have been a major economic factor in our lives, and only recently they were actually overtaken by the next largest generation, which is the millennials. So here's what we think is going to happen is that, of course, the boomers are getting older. Everybody in the baby boomer generation is going to be 65 in another 6 years or so by the age of 2030. So 65, that means that 10 years from then, 75 and older, unfortunately, right, with the average longevity right now is late 70s, early 80s, we're going to see people exiting and people departing. And what does that mean? What is that going to mean for the housing market? So some of them, I think, are going to be able to stay at home and do that. But also a lot of them, as much as they want to age at home and spend the rest of their golden years at home, that's probably not going to happen because of the physical limitations and emotional situations where they're going to need care. So this is what I think this article is about. So, of course, they're talking about how the baby boomers were named after the explosive population growth that took place after Second World War II, which we already know that. And baby boomers also hold right now the U.S. vast majority of equity as well as wealth. And that's why people are paying attention. This is why people are talking about it and trying to figure things out. What is going to happen and when? So here's where they're talking about here. They're also saying that the oldest boomers today are well into their retirement years and the youngest are not that far behind. And it's only natural to wonder what is going to come next once the generation starts to die and pass on the knowledge, property, as well as examples to their loved ones. The housing market is one particularly consequential piece of this puzzle, which is what I'm always keeping an eye for. But the experts have somewhat mixed feelings on what the boomers passing on will mean to the future of the U.S. real estate. So this is what we're talking about here. So older Americans combine to own around $19 trillion in real estate, guys. Trillion, not billions. And the reason, of course, is that equity has increased dramatically in the last 2 to 3 years because of the lower rates and the boom in the real estate market. And here we are, $19 trillion combined real estate holdings that boomers own totals around $5 trillion in assets over that of their children, which is Generation X. Older buyers have invested heavily in the real estate marketplace, not just to secure their own living space, but also in rental properties, vacation homes, and elsewhere as part of the thriving collecting savings portfolio. So yes, a lot of the boomers are also landlords and investors where they are not just they're not just relying on the stock market to plan for their retirement, but they're also relying on a real estate market, which I have always we've been a big proponent of using that as the vehicle for wealth growth. That is for sure. So what's next? Boomers grew up in a world where working hard resulted in quality salaries and affordable necessities like housing. Of course, the world has changed since the 60s and 70s, though, with wages stagnating and inflation continuing to kill off the wealth. But the vast war chest of real estate holding possessed by the older Americans led economists and market speculators to worry intensely about what the future is going to hold in real estate, whether it's going to be downsizing or passing away. Baby boomers, and by extension their beneficiaries, are currently in possession of a very hot commodity, which is going to very much transform the marketplace. So boomers are going to begin to leave their homes over the next 2 decades. I'm thinking it's probably going to be about 10 years or so, 12 years, where we're going to start seeing that. So the young baby boomers are currently around 60, while the oldest contingent is celebrating their 78th birthday, right? So if you're thinking about probably the half of the top tier of the baby boomers, you're talking about them heading into late 80s. And if you watched another video that I have done recently where I was talking about the longevity, a lot of people were thinking that I am crazy talking about baby boomers living well into their 90s. However, if you look at the technology and the medical advances that we have right now, it is very likely that a lot of you guys are going to be living well into your 90s, which means that if you're not planning for those extra 10 to 15 years, now is a good time to take notice and maybe do some adjustments. So over the next 20 years, boomers are going to begin to think about what their final act is going to be. And for some, those older years may mean moving into a smaller home or changing scenery altogether to enjoy a relaxing lifestyle. It could be a smaller home. It could be going into an independent living like a 55 plus community. And for some, depending on what their personal circumstances are for their emotional and physical health, it could be going into a community that caters to where you can get care in the same location without having to sell, downsize, and then head somewhere else. So those are the communities that I'm also talking to a lot of the sales directors today and asking them questions like, are you guys thinking about what is going to happen in the next 10 years or so? Are you prepared? Do you have enough space and room for those seniors that are probably going to be coming your way and exploring opportunities? And I think a lot of people they're not there yet. They don't have a plan. They're not thinking that far ahead. So analysts aren't unified on what this demographic change in America is going to hold for the real estate market. And death isn't the only feature of life that is going to prompt baby boomers to sell their homes. And there is a divergence over whether the future will experience the silver tsunami, which is kind of what people are thinking may happen, or more of a glacial market shift, which is more of kind of like a slower way. Either way, in the coming 2 decades, Older Americans and their beneficiaries will be forced to reckon with the allocation of this $19 trillion market. Experts appear more confident in the slower reallocation of wealth rather than a change all at once, but this position is far from being clear. And here's what I can tell you is that a real estate market is very much a slow moving elephant. It's not the same as a stock market that jumps up and down at the slightest change of news of some sort. If it didn't have coffee in the morning, it's going to be grouchy and grumpy all day long, and it's going to be jumping up and down every day. The real estate market does not behave like that. It's very slow moving. It's going to have its ups and downs, but it's going to be slow. And even if we're talking about silver tsunami, it's still going to be on the slower end. And I actually agree more with a glacial market drift more than a tsunami, because tsunami is, it comes and just destroys everything in its path. And that is more of a behavior that you would probably expect for the stock market, not for the real estate market. So it isn't likely to be a flood of new homes coming on the market, regardless of whether the boomers are going to sell in a crush of new real estate listings or more slowly. There isn't likely to be major shift in the real estate market as a result of the boomer activity. The reporting suggests that about 4.4 million homes will be affected each year until 2032 by a passing away of a member of the boomer generation. But the same forecast also estimates that only about 250,000 units will be added to the market annually, which essentially means that boomers' homes won't radically transform the outlook of the housing market in any substantial way for buyers. Other estimates also suggest around 20% of these homes will be converted into rental properties, and many more continue to house surviving spouses or other family members rather than going on the market. So for anyone hoping to burst into homeownership on the back of major demographic shift, this is not so good news. However, it's not surprising that major change isn't lurking just around the corner. Spouses and other beneficiaries may feel a sentimental attachment to the homes left to them, and barring, of course, a catastrophic event or a mass passing away of older homeowners, Americans, is not consistent with reality. I think I agree. And I agree that it's not going to be a crazy tsunami. However, it is going to be something to watch for because it is going to come. And here's what I can tell you. There's a lot of conversations that I talk about them every week here about the fact that there is a shortage of inventory that, of course, was a result of a couple of different things that happened in the last couple of years, which was refinancing. People are getting really great rates. And the question would be is, why would I want to move when I am sitting on in a home that has no mortgage or very low mortgage, or I have a very small balance? And why would I move? Because I am comfortable, and this is the home that I raised my family, and this is the home that I'm familiar with. And I totally understand that. So until what's going to happen is until it becomes painful for you or your loved ones, if these are your parents, where they're not able to climb the stairs anymore, or they fall and they hurt themselves, and then they have to go into rehab for getting back on their feet. And then the doctor in the rehab center is going to tell them that you cannot go back to your home. That is when the changes are going to be forced to be made. So that's what's going to happen, is when there's going to be a pain, kind of event, a life event that is going to happen where the change is going to have to be made. And that, what does that mean? That means the home is going to be sold to create the finances to figure out what the next step may be. And of course, that situation is different for each and every one of you. So that's one of the things that I always suggest is when we're talking to our clients too, and they say, well, the Fidelity or the Vanguard online is suggesting that this is what I do. And you are not that median. You're not the same one as everybody else. Every single one of you has a unique and different situation, very different factors, very different background in the story. And this is why you need to take this information with very much grain of salt and then make a decision and say, okay, here are the facts. Here are some options. 1, 2, 3, 4. What does that make sense to me? So that. All right, the next one that I want to share with you is having to do with this one. I thought this was very interesting too, about also talking about different generations and what are people doing right now. Okay, so I'll share with that one with you. Okay. All right, so this one talks about the generational shifts reshaping US housing markets and how millennials and boomers converge on key cities. And you know what, too? I actually have my notebook. I did put it. I have a guide for the different years for the generations because I actually find it very fascinating. And I in our real estate practice, we tend to work with all probably 3 or 4 different generations in the same situation with the families. So we're talking about here millennials. Okay, so millennials are 29 to 47 are the ones, and then what I find interesting about that generation is that they're having a new life stage. Delayed adulthood is what it's called, where they're waiting longer to have a career, figure out what they want to do, having kids, getting married, and also buying houses. So a lot of the times those things are now happening closer to 40s versus before it used to be closer to 30s. So I thought that was very interesting. So this particular article is talking about the fact that 2 different generations are actually choosing to focus on certain key cities. Okay, so demographic shifts are happening. And I find it interesting because, as you can imagine, we live in such a big country that it takes 6 to 7 hours to fly from east to west. And as an example, I travel to Texas every year for a conference. And I find, to me, I feel like I'm in a different world. There's everything is just so different. The architecture, the food, the landscaping, the grass. The grass is different. The trees, everything is different. So why is this shifts happening? And this is what I was reading. So millennials, as you know, surpassed the boomers as the largest home buying generation back in 2014, and their preferences and economic circumstances have been setting the tone in many markets. Millennials have been characterized by delayed life events, including the homeownership, which is what I just mentioned, but are now increasingly looking to settle down as they get older. As millennials seek to establish roots and grow their families, they are gravitating towards markets that offer a blend of affordability, job opportunity, and lifestyle amenities. But at the same time, the boomers, many of whom are approaching retirement or already there, are beginning to make moves that reflect their changing needs. So about 25% of boomers plan to retire near their children and grandchildren, a trend that underscores a significant demographic shift where the younger generation's migration patterns directly influence those of their parents. And you know what? This is a conversation that I can tell you that probably most of my clients have, that has come up out loud, where a lot of them have challenges because if they have 2 or 3 kids, and let's say that one of them is on the West Coast and the 2 of them are on the East Coast, and they're stuck in the middle, it's very challenging for them emotionally to make a decision as to where they want to move to be close to everybody. They're torn. It's hard to make those decisions. I have a client now, and she told me that when she was talking to her financial planner, the financial planner told her not to follow her kids. So I think one of the kids is in St. Louis, another one is in Chicago, then another one is in New Jersey, and I think there's a 4th one somewhere as well. And the reason why the financial planner told them not to follow their kids, because what happens if you get settled, but then one of the kids or a husband or a wife gets a new job and now the family needs to relocate? Are you also going to sell your home and then again pick up and move somewhere else? That's a hard one. I don't have a good answer or suggestion for you. However, the idea is for you to figure out what makes sense for you. Do you have to worry about cold weather affecting you? Do you like the idea of having 4 seasons? Maybe you don't like heat. All of these considerations, I think, are important when we're talking about where are we going and are we following our children and grandchildren. So this given has rise to phenomenon where baby boomers follow millennials, both to be near their grandchildren and to take advantage of the market attributes that appeal to both generations. So let's look at a couple of these housing markets that they're talking about. So the first one is Austin, Texas. Funny because this is actually where I travel every year in August. Yes, 100 degrees every day. Every year. So Austin, Texas retained its top spot for the fifth consecutive year, despite challenges like rising living costs in the softening tech sector. The state capital continues to draw millennials and has a growing boomer population attracted by its labor market and Texas Hill country's lifestyle. I can tell you that when I was here in Austin in August, and I had conversations with a few agents that are friends that I have there, their market has shifted pretty significantly from what it was back in the same time last year, where last year was definitely seller's market and they were getting multiple offers and there were people overbidding on homes. This year, homes are sitting much longer and buyers have a lot more choices and they can be more pickier about what they're looking for and where. So that I can definitely see for sure. 3 out of 10 were in Texas. The 2 other Texas markets were Dallas and Houston, landed in the top 10 this year, while San Antonio ranked number 11. The next one we have is Charleston, South Carolina, climbed to number 2 in the rankings and saw the second highest year-over-year growth. Of course, South Carolina is one of the top states that typically boomers flank to because they're looking for that warmer climate and also being in pretty decent proximity to the beaches. So I can understand that. Boise and Orlando both dropped 4 positions in 2023 due to slower year-over-year growth among both boomers and millennials. I thought that was interesting because Boise, I believe, is the number 1 in the country that has seen the equity increase in the last couple of years. I believe the percentage is like 50 or 60%. Can you imagine that? And when I talked to a friend of mine in Boise that I saw in August, she told me things are still pretty hopping and they're still pretty busy. Of course, Orlando is in the Florida, the number 1 state where a lot of people are flocking to. And a big part of that is because there is no state pension. I have actually heard that there are some slowing downs right now in their market as well. So we have Orlando, and then the Panhandle is slowing down as well, where there's more inventory. So that's what I actually talked to an agent last week about that. Jacksonville, Florida secured number 3 spot, driven by year-over-year increase in millennials. From what I understand, there are quite a few spots in Jacksonville that are affordable, where you can find something for $200,000 and $300,000, where in some other markets it's almost impossible. So there's an opportunity there. Concentration along the Smile States. Boise was the only 2023 baby chaser market not located across the southern states. So here we are. It's interesting that you can see the spreadsheet here. So in the 2023, this is what we have. So we actually have number 9 is Oklahoma, number 10 is Houston, Boise, Raleigh, Dallas, Jackson, Charleston, and Austin. Yeah, I can see that. So Texas dominated 2023 with a couple of different cities, and Austin in particular remains a standout market despite the challenges with the tech sector. Of course, where the jobs are is where millennials go. So relative affordability drives the appeal of Dallas and Houston, as well as diversified economies and housing options. I agree. I actually have clients that came back. And they came back not because they didn't like Texas, because they originally sold their home in New Jersey and then they went to Houston. They ended up settling in the suburb of Houston. And now they're back because of the jobs opportunity. So they're thinking they're going to be back here maybe for about 3 to 5 years. And then they're going back. They're keeping their house in the Houston suburb. And I asked them, so what did you think? They loved it. They loved the schools. They loved the community. They liked the weather, because most of the time it is mild, of course, except for the summertime. Yet the work opportunities brought them back, and they're now in the market to look for something. So, but I enjoyed really hearing them about their experience because they always lived in this area. So Carolinas, of course, is the coastal appeal, right? We talked a little bit about Charleston. And Let's see what else is here that I thought that was interesting. Okay, so this is actually not a good map. If you wanted to kind of look at the more than just the top 10, you can actually look at this map and it'll give you some good ideas. They're talking about the smile state is typically it's the southern states that are attracting people, and a lot of that had to do with, of course, the warm, the climate and the weather. So that was interesting. So that's that one that I wanted to share with you. And the last one is this one. I wanted to share with you if you are thinking about either aging at home or maybe downsizing into something else, what are some of the features that you should be looking for in the home? So this is the research that was done recently, and this article actually covers 6 home features that boomers want the most. And I want you to think about what does that mean for you, because again, all of you are different, but this is what was done based on the research, and these are some of the best features, maybe the top ones. It's almost like on the Family Feud, you know, where you have the top 10 categories. This is sort of like that, but instead of 10, we're talking about 6. So let's see what they are, and then I can give you my own perspective on it. So, well-designed kitchen with lots of counter space. 61% of boomers said that this feature is important. You know what? A lot of people want to cook and enjoy their time and maybe make breakfast and have that coffee and have that as an experience. A lot of people now, when they retire, they say, you know what, I have more time. I'm going to do some more exploring. Maybe I'm going to learn how to make certain dishes, and having that extra space in the kitchen is important. So yes, I agree with that one. The next one is few or no stairs. 57% of boomers say it's a feature is important. I can guarantee you the older the boomers are, the higher that percentage is going to be, because stairs become the number one or the top, I'm going to say 2 or 3 factor in why the home that you love, that has been your life and everything, is going to become a trap for you, and your prison is because of the stairs, because they're now going to prevent you from going to your bedroom. They're going to prevent you from going to get to your washer and dryer if it's in the basement. And you know what? If you live in a home that is a style like a split level, where you literally come in and you have to make a decision, you need to go up the stairs or down the stairs just to get into your home, that's going to be a problem as the time goes by, as your health declines, which is a fact of life. So stairs is a big one. And of course, there are ways to work around it. However, I want you to think about what kind of steps do you have in your home, if they're going to be straight flight or if they're going to be curved. And if that is something that maybe needs to be worked on, there are some options. There's an options of having the chair rail. There's an options to have an elevator. I actually recently saw a very cool elevator that was installed in a 2-story living room. And it was literally very simple construction. It was just 2 support bars, and the cabin itself of the elevator was right in between. Very simple construction. And I loved it because it provided an opportunity for that particular seller to stay in that home a lot longer if that elevator was not available. So I thought that was really, really, really interesting. Attached garage. Percentage of boomers who say this feature is important, 51%. Here's something interesting that I have found. I had a client that moved here from Wisconsin. And in the beginning, he told me he was looking for 3-car garage. And I told him that's going to be very difficult to find. And then the note that he made was this. He said, Olga, I'm surprised that not more people are actually leaving their cars and parking in the garage, which is where he comes from. There's a lot more snow than we are here on the East Coast. And he's like, we park in the garage because if there's snow, we just clear the driveway and then we just open up the garage and off we go. So different states and people in different states perceive using the garage very differently, where I try to encourage people in our area to stop keeping their crap and stuff that's not worth a lot and then having their $50,000, $60,000 car sitting outside in all of elements. So My recommendation to you is do some decluttering, organize things, put things on the walls, attach some things to the ceilings. We talk about that in the declutter class. Use the shelves, invest in systems so that way you get your stuff organized and off the floor, and then put in your vehicle, because your vehicle is the second most important investment that you made after your house that you purchased. The next one is ground floor master, or now call it primary bedroom. 50% of the boomers say this feature is important. I can tell you for a fact that this percentage is higher the older you are. And this is a conversation that I often help with those clients that are very much stuck and they are insistent, and they are saying, we are going to do everything that we can. We're going to stay in our home. Okay. Then let's look at the empty rooms that you have on the first floor, which typically means a dining room and a living room. And how can we convert those rooms into a bedroom, which quite often is actually very easy. You get unnecessary furniture out, you install a door if there's anything there, and then let's look at your bathroom situation. Can we expand your powder room? Or if you already have a full bath on the first floor, then you are all set. So it's very easy to convert, and sometimes you just have to overstep that thinking that it's my living room and this is where I set up the tree, or maybe this is where I have Thanksgiving dinner. Really, it's just 2 events a year, and then the rest of the time this amazing space sits there and does absolutely nothing. So why not utilize it to make sure that it is for the best for you? How can that space work best for you and your situation? Yep, we're heading into grab rails in the showers. 100% absolute necessity and the must. I'm a big believer in having those rails basically anywhere you need to get into the house, whether it's a garage, from the backyard, in different rooms where there's steps, and in the bathrooms. You need to have support. People, I'm surprised that this is only 45%. I think it should be probably like 90%. It is a very easy way to make sure that you are safe in your home and you are using your hands to support yourself, to stand up or to sit down or to get in from a different room. So very easy fix to help you and prevent you from falling. 100%. And the last one, I think this should be number 6, is natural lighting. Percentage of boomers who say this feature is important, 38%. Remember, light is vitamin D, and you absolutely need it, especially when you get older, because you become more and more deficient when you get older. So open up those blinds, open up those curtains, especially in the winter time. You need to catch that sunlight as much as possible. And you know what too? Light helps with your mood. If you are not feeling it, maybe you're not feeling well, maybe you are just not sure what to do today, or you lost your sense of purpose for a couple of days, or whatever it is, having some sunshine and some light coming through your windows is going to do wonders for your mood. So that's what I truly believe in. All right. So yeah, that's the last one that I had for you in terms of the news, right? The things that we have. And the last article that I want to share with you, actually, I just added it on because it has to do with the Fed making a key interest rate by hefty half percentage point. This is what happened today. So let me show you this one. And then I want to jump into, actually, there was a really awesome question that was posted, that was sent to me, and I'm curious to hear your responses on it. All right, so this is the one about the federal rates, and we're just going to talk a little bit about what does that mean for everybody and why it's important to pay attention. Let's see. Okay. Here we go. Fed lowers key interest rates. I was surprised. They actually dropped it by half percentage point, which is a lot. And I think the reason is because what they were mentioning was that they felt comfortable because the inflation has been very steady at 2%. So they felt comfortable doing this drop to do a little bit of a nudge in the economy. And I really think that half a percentage is actually going to do it. So let me find the article about this. Let's see. All right. So with the slowing labor market posing a growing risk to the economic expansion, okay, and the hefty half percentage point on Wednesday came today ahead as the first rate cut in 4 years. So this is pretty big, okay? And a couple of things. So let's see what's important to mention here. The economic outlook is uncertain. They always say that. And the Fed is attentive to the risks of both sides of the dual mandate. Federal officials also said inflation has made further progress towards their 2% goal. So that was a big thing in their decision-making process. And our intent with our policy move today is to keep it there. The economy and the job market are still on a solid footing. The time to support the labor market is while it's strong, not when you start seeing layoffs. That makes sense. And you can take this as a sign of our commitment not to get behind. I also think that this rate drop also has to do with the fact that we have upcoming elections. I've seen that happen typically where it looks nice. It looks good for the upcoming elections to kind of spur up the economy to get things moving in the right direction. So what this is going to actually mean, the Fed's decision lowers the benchmark short-term rate to a range of 4.75 to 5% from 23-year high of 5.25 to 5.5. And what's going to happen is it's going to make changes on the interest rates, which I'm going to watch and I'm going to report to you next week to see what does that mean. And what at the same time is what is going to do is also going to trim a little bit the earnings that you can get from having the high yield savings accounts, because that's what happens. When the rates go up, the interest rate goes up on the savings account. When the rates go down, you start saving less on those as well, but they're still really good. So that's the goal. So they're talking about maybe a couple more rates. I'm just going to wait and see. I was kind of waiting to see what happened today to see. And then we're going to keep an eye out on what is happening in the next couple of months, right? And then we'll see what happens for the rest of the month as well. So that's the other article that I wanted to share with you. And now I want to share with you the question that came up that I want to ask your opinion about. Okay. And that has to do actually with the fact about, should you be debt free in the retirement, or is it okay to have a mortgage? So I would love to hear your opinion. So here's what the question is. So let me show you this. Okay. So the question came from a viewer called Odd B. One of the most common answers was to be debt free in the retirement, including a mortgage. I got to thinking about that and what that may actually mean. Suppose that on average, people get married at about 25, start to have kids 2 to 5 years later, with the childbearing age being between 5 to 10 years. And that would put the last child born when you're between 32 and 40. And assuming that your last child leaves the house at 18, you're going to be between 50 and 58 when that happens. So if the aim is to be debt-free by, say, age 65, I can see that, and you have a 25-year mortgage, this means that you had to buy your house at the age of 40 if you had a child. And that seems out of norm and kind of earlier than I expected. So let me just see what else he said. So you want to be mortgage free by 60. That pushes the last house purchase to 35. Bottom line, to be mortgage free by retirement age, you have to buy your last house about the time the birth of your last child. So I'm curious what you guys thinking about this. Do you feel comfortable having a mortgage when you're retired, or is really your intention because that's what you think is right, or maybe what you learned is right, and what you think? So that's kind of the food for thought, because I think it's helpful for somebody who is planning, maybe they're in their early 50s and they have maybe another 10 to 15 years left. And you know what, too? A lot of us, myself included, refinanced our mortgages in between 20 and 2023 because of the fact that the rates were low. Okay, the rates were so low and they were so attractive. The refinancing was huge, and You just couldn't not do it. But here's what you have to remember when you refinance. Unless you're being smart about it, when you refinance, you get a new loan, and the new loan is now for 30 years again. It's not just for the time that you had your other loan before. So I always tell people you have to be careful about what you're doing. I understand that you're all excited because you now have a new rate and you have potentially a lower monthly payment. But does that mean now you have another payment to make, although lower, for another 30 years? Does that make sense to you? So, all right, let's see what we got. Ironman 49 says, at the age of 63, I was able to sell my home and purchase a smaller home and paid in full. So I am debt-free going into retirement, and that allows me to retire sooner. I like that. You know what, too? That is another conversation that I'm having with my clients where they say, Olga, why would I give up my 2.5% rate and I only have 50,000 to go? And then my house is going to be paid off. And I say, well, let's talk about this just besides. I'm like, if you put the mortgage payment aside, let's talk about everything else. You live in a 3,000 square foot home. You have to take care of it. You have to maintain it. You have to pay taxes on that home. You have to mow the grass. You have to potentially worry about snow. Is it a lot? How about your stairs? Going up and then going down. What about expenses on that home? What if you were to figure out the expenses on this big castle that you have that made sense for you before your kids moved out and maybe had their own families? If you were to look at those expenses and then you would say, you know what, if I was to sell my house, and yes, I know that the prices are much higher now, and let's say that you would spend just about the same amount of money on the smaller home, but your expenses would be cut in half. Wouldn't that make sense to you? Wouldn't that make a weight on your shoulders just a bit easier? Think about that. So these are the kind of conversations that I'm having with a lot of clients right now, where we say, okay, let's do some pros and cons. Where you are at now and where could it be? Could that outweigh all of the things that you have now? Because when you are going to be in retirement, you're going to have fixed income. So what does that mean? You either increase your income, and that could mean maybe getting a part-time job, or you decrease your expenses. And a big part of your expenses is in your housing. It's the roof over your head. So all right, let's see what else we got. Or Cerveza says, same age, I did exactly the same thing. I was in the military and moved every few years, so I never actually paid off a mortgage, but we did earn some equity in the last place we moved to. And we moved to a small rural town in an area where I grew up. And we're able to pay cash for a house because houses are so cheap out there. And now that I'm retired, I have been able to complete a bunch of upgrades, maintenance, and items that I was needing. Okay. I think when you're in the military, it's a little bit different than most people, because if you are having your different duty stations and you move every 3 to 4 years, I know, being in the military family, I know that some people will actually buy a home at every duty station and then they keep it for a little bit and then they may sell it, because again, remember, the rate of the equity growth in the real estate market in a normal average is about 4 to 6% every year. So military members, if they really did this the smart way, they could really make out and grow some wealth with the real estate that they had, depending on their duty stations. Rivak, hi, says, that is what I did. I think trading up in houses a few times as your career progresses and you make more money probably nets more from the final sale of your house than staying in your starter home for 30 years. We sold and downsized this year. We still have a small mortgage, but it's not much of a monthly cost. I like that. Going to and downsizing is going to decrease your expenses. And you know what? A small mortgage is not that bad. You know, I'm not against having, if the clients are telling me I have small mortgage, it's not as impactful as having a full scale mortgage that you just refinance and you now have it again for the next 30 years. So Gumi T says, same here. I sold my 900 square foot California home, bought a 1,200 square foot home in Oregon for cash, and I'm 62. All right, so here's kind of like a different situation where this listener actually upsized. However, if you think about it, California market and Oregon market are very different. So they sold a smaller home. They actually got a larger home a little bit, but they were able to pay for cash because California market is a very different level than many states. And this person is 62, which means that they have the biggest part of their expenses now under control because they don't have a mortgage. I applaud to you. Good choices. Measurement or MeasureNet. This is what I am currently doing. Okay. Looking for a smaller house to hopefully age in place. Add few or no stairs, the ability to make the bathroom handicap accessible, etc. Absolutely. I applaud you because you are looking and thinking ahead. And if mobility is going to be an issue for you, then that is something that you definitely want to think about. I do suggest to my clients to have honest and hard conversations with yourself, sitting down, grabbing a notebook, and jotting down in those to say, okay, where do I think I'm going to be health-wise in the next 5 to 7 to 10 years? Is my mobility going to be an issue? What about my spouse? Do I have to think about that? And yes, you have to ask yourself those hard questions and you have to plan ahead. And having a home with no stairs, not having to worry about going up and down to go to the bedroom or to your laundry is very important. And to make sure that your home has the handicap accessible, either already accessories already built in or making those modifications now and getting the contractors involved. I think it's a very smart move. Megmom says, we worked very hard to be debt-free by retirement. Sadly, we both became disabled 5 years before we were going to retire. We had our house paid off, 2 cars paid off, and only 1 credit card bill. It saved us because we had almost 2 years of no income while we both battled severe illness and disability. Life doesn't come with an easy step-by-step approach, but I think what you are doing is the right thing. Well, I'm sorry you're going through the challenges, and I'm glad that you were saving and that you were debt-free. Very important. Hi, Boldu, 1960s. I owe around $30,000 on my condo, and I have been retired for 5 years now. The interest rate is 3.5%, and I felt it was better off not paying it off and keeping my cash invested. Hey, this is a great example of what I was talking about, where your rate on your mortgage is actually just a little bit above the inflation rate for last year, which was 3.2, right? And that was the rate of increase that everybody got for the Social Security. But yet you can put your cash into high yield savings account and get almost 5% on it. So I think that's a smart move. 3.5% is almost like free money. Plus, you don't have a high balance. So I applaud you. I think it's a smart move. And here's the other thing. You have the cash. You can always pay off your mortgage, or you can put more money towards it, but you can't take it back. So that's, I think, is another way of looking at it. Nightcap says, I am in total agreement. I have a paltry sum outstanding, $53,000 at 3.3%. I even have that money earmarked if I need, but there's no way I'm losing the money just to retire a debt that will be over in 5 years anyway. I make more in my high yield savings account. I'm 67, but have no care about that at all. Agree. So this person actually has the $53,000 to pay it off, but he's choosing to actually make money on that money because he's making more money. If you think about it, if the mortgage rate is 3.3 and Nightcap has this money in the high yield savings account of 5, that means he's actually making, let's see, 1.7% on that money, because technically, 3.3 minus 5. So right on. Bob 494 says, we always refinance when rates drop. A $300,000 average balance mortgage making 2% over investment returns makes $6,000 a year. Over 30 years, that's $180,000 plus reinvestment income. That is a huge boost to retirement finances, not a detriment. Just a word of caution, where we talked about refinancing. If you're going to refinance and you want to keep that mortgage for the same years that you had before, you're going to have to adjust your expectations. You may have to adjust it for 15 years, or maybe go even shorter if you can. Or you do 15 years and you figure out how much of a monthly payment you need to make to pay off faster. That's what you need to do. I think the rule of thumb is that if you make an extra 1 month of mortgage payment, you can split it any way you want to over 12 months. It's going to cut your mortgage overall by 7 years. So you can, there's a couple of mortgage hacks that I recommend to some of my younger clients, and of course the kids of the boomer parents that I work with. I always tell them you can make 2 payments a month if you want, but just you have to make sure that the first part of the payment gets applied to principal right away, and they don't just put that money and keep it in somewhere floating until the end of the month. So that's one way. You can make 1 extra mortgage payment over 12 months, or you can do a certain amount every month that will go strictly towards your principal payment. Because there's an actual option. If you do auto pay, which is what I strictly recommend, you auto pay your mortgage payment and as many other bills as you can, there's an option for you to add a certain amount to pay extra towards your principal every month. So I'm a big believer in doing that. So there's a couple of ways that you can do that to chip away and get this under control and paid off faster. Deep Curious says, those of us who were lucky enough to get mortgages in the low 3s are paying attention to the spread we realize in other investments, earning 5, 6, or 7%. Having a nearly free mortgage and other assets, earning double what the mortgage is costing doesn't seem like the stupidest play in the world. I hear you. I hear you. I think some people are having fun with that as well, is what it sounds like. D47. In my retirement planning, I see 2 types of expenses, those that must be paid and those that are more discretionary, 100%. The lower the must pay number, the more flexible the withdrawal strategy can be. And that in turn greatly reduces the risk. This is especially true of sequence of returns risk. I agree with you. When we're talking about expenses, which is what I mentioned earlier to you, write them down in your planner, and you can even make 2 different columns. The things that you have to have, the necessary expenses, which is, your housing, your food, your utilities, your cell phone. Those are the things that you absolutely have to have. And there are other things that we would like to have. We like to have, but they're not necessary for our survival. So good thinking. Thank you for contributing. Southern Cal Jen says, it all depends on your income. I get about $1,600 a month, and probably $600 goes to Medicare, supplement, car insurance, house insurance, and property taxes. So it's tough, but renting would be hard. I hear you. Harder. I hear you. It depends. You know what? I know quite a few people, and I'm curious what you guys think about it. There are quite a few people that I know that rely on Social Security as their main source of income. And then most of their wealth is tied into their home in the form of equity. So they live in the home mortgage free. And let's say their home is worth $500,000 because the market is great for them. And they have Social Security, and that's it. And they have no other savings and no other income. And that's tough. What do you do in those situations? And this is where we talk strategy and figure out to say, okay, could we maybe downsize into something smaller? And then we put a portion towards that new house. Actually, I have a really good story for you about that, because we have a client that just closed on a home this week, exactly with that situation. She lived in a big house, even though it was a rancher, but her husband passed away suddenly a few years back. And she sold the house for $700,000. And she really needed to go into something smaller because she is nearing 80. And that was just too big of a house. It was such a burden on her. Even though she loved it and she had really good memories in it, she said she knew she needed to downsize. So what we did is we found her a really great home that was, so she went from 3,000 square foot home into a 1,600 square foot home in a really nice 55 plus community where she doesn't have to take care of exterior. She actually has her patio faces the woods, and it's very lovely. And there's a walking path right behind her patio. And she doesn't have to worry about grass cutting. She doesn't have to worry about snow removal, none of that. And she bought that home for $420,000, which means that the rest of that money is going to go into her high yield savings account, where it's going to grow and it's going to be there just in case she needs it as a rainy day fund and her savings. And she's thrilled. She's so happy. And as you can imagine, that kind of move took us about a year and a half to figure out and to put together, because it's a lot for someone who's moving when they're 80. However, she's thrilled. She has a huge weight off her shoulders. And she said, I should have done it sooner, Olga. So AZ Free says, buy a house you can afford on a 30-year mortgage around age 40. Your prime earning years will be 45 to 60. You should be able to pay it off in the house in 12 to 15 years by making extra contributions to the principal. Don't let your lifestyle grow with your income and you will be fine. I love that idea. I love the plan. I can probably count on my fingers the percentage of people that actually do that, unfortunately. Most people do stretch it out, or they refinance, or they move before they pay off their mortgage. Very few people have the discipline and the desire, because it is a someday focus and someday goal. It's not your same day gratification is what I'm looking for. That's the word I was looking for. 12 to 15 years is a long time to wait for something to happen. And very few people have the discipline to do this every month and to say, you know what, I'm not going to buy something because this is frivolous. I don't really need this, especially now in the days of influencers and the TikTok and Instagram and all of those people saying you have to have this gadget because look how nice this looks and everybody else is buying it. And it's viral and I'm obsessed, all those fancy words that they're using. So I hear you. PS2 says we paid off our 30-year mortgage in 17 years. We sold one house, bought another, and did a refi. But from the purchase of the very first home to fully paid off was 17 years. I applaud you. That's an amazing plan. Okay, so 2 houses. Very cool. That's some planning and being strategic about it and discipline for sure. Dragonfly 19 says, we bought a brand new house for retirement. My husband's career moved us around a lot, and we had no desire to stay forever in the last place he worked. We felt buying a new home would mean fewer repairs. We went for a floor plan that really works for this state of life and a location we both really like. Paid for it, proceeds from the previous house. And once you pay off a house, any house, having a different house without a mortgage is a completely different equation. I hear you. I do. Completely understand. It's like, I think for a lot of people, it's a big weight off your shoulders. Even though, if you think about it, in the eyes of the IRS, and when you're talking about some different financial planners, mortgage is considered to be a good debt, because a good debt is something that is necessary in a lot of ways because you needed to buy a house, and having a home is having a roof over your shoulders, and then you're paying that off. And because you're doing that, what you're doing is you are increasing your equity and you are helping yourself because you're being a homeowner, you're having tax deductions, and of course your real estate grows every year. The value grows at least 4 to 6%, unless we're in a crazy market like we've had for the last 2 or 3 years, or maybe you're in Boise, Idaho, where the values have increased by like 50%, which is crazy. So this is actually a good idea. So I think that the answer to the question as to are you going into retirement with a mortgage or do you pay it off also depends. Like one of the questions that I can ask you about is, before you pay off your mortgage, do you have 6 months of rainy day funds? What if something happens and you need to fix it? You need to put new battery. I'm just taking an example from my own case, right? I just had to recently replace all 4 tires in my car. My car is all-wheel drive, which means I had to do all 4 tires, and it cost me $1,000. $1,000 just like that. And I put it on my credit card. I pay off my credit cards every month. But do you have $1,000 in your rainy day fund? You know what? $1,000 may be nothing. What if you had to get some work done that was serious, that had to do with your engine, and it cost $3,000? Do you have that money in the rainy day fund to help you? What if you had to have a procedure or surgery, something that's life threatening, and you had a deductible that you have to pay because of the type of medical plan that you have? Having a rainy day fund is extremely important, and it also gives you a peace of mind, just like you're debt free and you don't have a mortgage, giving you peace of mind knowing that if something happens, whether it's with you, and you know how life is, it's going to throw you a curveball when it's the worst possible time ever, because that's what happens. Like your furnace breaking when it's the month of February and it's snowing outside. You know how much your brand new furnace costs? If you had to replace, if you have old equipment, very likely you're going to have to replace both your furnace and central air, and it's going to cost you a minimum of $10,000. So how many of you actually have $10,000 in your savings account right now that you can say, Olga, I'm good, not a problem, I have it saved? Probably not a lot of you, because that's what the rainy day fund is for. And I can also ask you a piggyback question on that is, how many of you know the age of your furnace and AC? Probably a lot of you don't know that, because that's a helpful thing to know. That way you know how long those mechanicals are going to last you in your home, so that way you can plan ahead for that replacement. Or when was the last time you guys have serviced? I know I'm going down the rabbit hole, that's for sure. But when was the last time you actually serviced your furnace? Because we are in the month of September. The phone calls that I'm having with my clients right now, besides how are you and how are we doing, how was your summer, is like, hey, by the way, we're heading into the colder seasons because we are in a 4-season state. The winter is going to be here sooner than you think. When was the last time you serviced your furnace? And let's get that appointment scheduled now, before they get too busy, because they're going to be having emergency calls because it's cold and they're trying to turn on the furnace and it's not working. So you want to stay ahead of the game. And it's also going to save you money, because if you do an emergency phone call to an HVAC contractor, it's going to cost you more than just a regular service and tune-up appointment, which can probably cost you a couple $100. So that is my suggestion. So having or not having or paying off the mortgage is going to depend on a couple of different factors that is very much personal and depends on you guys, on each of your personal situations. If you don't have a spreadsheet that you are updating every month that shows you your expenses and how they fluctuate, that's another important thing. When was the last time you looked at your expenses and to see how it fluctuates based on what season that you're in and what month are you in? If you haven't done one, I have a spreadsheet that I share in most of my videos. You're welcome to find it, or if you want, comment under this one and I will send it to you. It's very simple to do. However, it's eye-opening, and I guarantee you, even if you're not a spreadsheet person, it's very easy to use. And at the same time, it's going to give you a peace of mind that you probably didn't even know you wanted or needed, for your brain to understand that this is the expenses that I have and you have things under control. Or are there some things that potentially you are going to look at your spreadsheet and say, you know what? We need to rethink some of these things. Maybe your insurance premium went up by a lot. Maybe it's time to shop. You know, guys, you don't have to wait for your homeowners to renew every 6 months or every year for you to shop for a new premium. I actually do it every year. It is not a fun experience, but it's something that I feel is necessary, because that's how you're going to trim and control your expenses. I put everything as reminders on my calendars. Don't think you're going to remember everything. And also, don't beat yourself up if you don't. Use the tools that are available right now, the free technology called Google and Google Calendar. It's one of my favorite things to use. So let me see what else I have. If anybody else has anything that they want to, that came up. All right. Well, I think that will be it then. this was a very lively discussion. I would love to hear if you guys have anything else to add with regards to, I have a small mortgage and I'm okay with it, or I am going to just keep on working potentially full time until I pay off my mortgage and then I'm going to retire. That's another scenario as well. So lots of food for thought that I always have every week. And as usual, I'm going to see you again next week because there's going to be more news and more things that will be coming up that I'm sure we could talk about. So as always, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed this hour of chatting with me, and we will see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.